Welcome to the Prairie Oaks Pulpit Bible Study. And we've been going through John's Gospel as he reports on the trials that lead up to Jesus being executed, crucified on a Roman cross. And last week we saw where Peter denied Jesus 3 times, even though he was warned of the coming temptation and testing that he would face. He wasn't ready for it. And we really wanted to look at how to be ready to face temptation and how to be ready when tested. And saw where the real key was prayer. Prayer coming into those circumstances as well as through those circumstances. Now, John skips over what's taking place as Peter denies, and that is the Jewish trials that take place. He mentions Annas, who was the former high priest, and his son-in-law, Caiaphas, is the current high priest who rules over the Sanhedrin, the main Jewish council, who had already decided they were going to accuse and convict Jesus of blasphemy. And so that's reported in the other Gospels, that travesty of justice that takes place there without calling any reliable witnesses, but they convict him of blasphemy and take him to the Roman governor because they want him executed. And frankly, they understand that Pilate isn't going to be impressed with charges of blasphemy. He's a blasphemer himself. And so they're going to have to come up with some new charges to get Pilate's attention to execute him. And so that's where we pick up in John chapter 18, and we're going to start reading in verse 28. Then they led Jesus from Caiaphas to the praetorium, and it was early morning. But they themselves did not go into the praetorium, lest they should be defiled, but that they might eat the Passover. Pilate then went out to them and said, "What accusation do you bring against this man?" They answered and said to him, "If he were not an evildoer, we would not have delivered him up to you." Then Pilate said to them, "You take him and judge him according to your law." Therefore the Jews said to him, "It is not lawful for us to put anyone to death, that the saying of Jesus might be fulfilled, which he spoke, signifying by what death he would die." Then Pilate entered the praetorium again, called Jesus, and said to him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered him, "Are you speaking for yourself about this, or did others tell you this concerning me?" Pilate answered, "Am I a Jew? Your own nation and chief priests have delivered you to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would fight, so that I should not be delivered to the Jews. But now my kingdom is not from here." Pilate therefore said to him, "Are you a king then?" Jesus answered, "You say rightly that I am a king. For this cause I was born, and for this cause I have come into the world, that I should bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth hears my voice." Pilate said to him, "What is truth?" And when he had said this, he went out again to the Jews and said to them, "I find no fault in him at all. But you have a custom that I should release someone to you at the Passover. Do you therefore want me to release to you the King of the Jews?" Then they all cried again, saying, "Not this man, but Barabbas." Now Barabbas was a robber. And so we see here where the Sanhedrin, they're convinced they want Jesus executed, and so they go to Pilate. Now Rome was very jealous of the power to execute. They didn't just let the locals execute people, because they probably wind up executing people that were loyal to Rome, especially the Jewish people, since they were always on the verge of a rebellion anyways. And so that plays a role. One, why they would sometimes get a mob together and stone somebody, which was the preferred way that they would kill someone. But they always got in trouble if they did. But if they brought this person to Rome, then Rome would normally take care of the situation for them. The governor, Pilate, for Rome, would execute. Now, they go to him, and notice the irony that John includes in his report, that the Jewish leaders were very scrupulous. They didn't want to be ceremonially corrupted or defiled by going into a Gentile's house. Who knows what kind of Gentile corruptions could be in there. And so they stood outside and had him come to them. And all the while, they are executing an innocent man. They professed with their mouth, but their heart was very far from God. And that little evidence here is obvious through the whole story, isn't it? But Pilate comes out and he's like, all right, let's do this by the books. You bring an accusation to me if you bring a prisoner to me. What has he done wrong? And they're kind of frustrated with him. They were just kind of hoping he would take care of the business based on their saying, we want him executed. And so there's apparently some back and forth on this, as you see in the verses here. He's like, well, you just go and take care of it yourselves. Nope, we want him dead. And it was also, John realized, part of the prophecy of Jesus. Remember in John chapter 3, Jesus said that he would be lifted up, just as the serpent in the wilderness was. That lifted up was slang for being crucified. And he mentioned it often, as recorded in John's gospel as well as others. He knew how he would die. He wouldn't die under a pile of rocks. He would die on a cruel Roman cross. And so apparently they tell him this is sedition. He is a rebel against Rome. He thinks he's a king. You need to take care of this. And so he goes into the judgment hall. That's what the praetorium is. And calls for Jesus. And he says, so, are you the king of the Jews? Now, it's kind of a loaded question. Because, well, is he a king of the Jews? The answer is kind of both, isn't it? So, Jesus asks him to clarify the question, doesn't he? Is this from your perspective or from someone else's perspective? And Pilate admits, I'm not a Jew. I'm not interested in this Jewish stuff. In fact, he'd proven that many a times, according to the Jewish historian Josephus. Pilate wasn't real friendly to the Jews. And so Pilate says, let's get to the point. What have you done to make these people so mad at you? What have you done? Your own people have delivered me to you to be executed. Why? And Jesus answers the question, verse 36. My kingdom is not of this world. That's the problem, isn't it? They were looking for a Messiah, but they were wanting a Messiah who was going to set up a kingdom of this world, beat up on the Romans and all the rest of their enemies, and bring prosperity and fame to the, well, especially to them, the Jewish leaders. But all the Jewish people kind of wanted that. But that's not what Jesus came to do. That's not what his kingdom was all about, is it? So Jesus says, my kingdom is not of this world. That is the problem that the authorities have with me. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would fight. Now, it's interesting. The servants wouldn't fight. Who are the servants he's talking about? Was he talking about the disciples? Well, they fled. They got out of town. True servants would be, did Jesus not say to Peter, I could call upon 12 legions of angels to deliver me if I wanted. But this is what I came to do. And And so rather than be delivered to rather than being delivered from the Jews, he was delivered to the Jews in order to die, because his kingdom is not from here. Now, there's two things important to mention here. One is that a lot of anti-Semitism comes from this part of the Gospels, or let me rephrase that. It didn't come from this, but this has been used as an excuse for anti-Semitism because the Jews executed Jesus. But that doesn't come from this. It comes from the devil, because the persons reporting these events are Jews themselves. Matthew, Mark, John, Peter, Paul, all of them, they're Jewish. And they would be bringing trouble upon themselves, but also they loved their people. Paul said he'd lay down his life for them. They all literally did, in pursuing the salvation of their own people. Because the book of Acts records, and history is as well, that they pursued the Jewish people to receive their king following the resurrection and the ascension. And so that's worth mentioning here. So even though the Jewish people rejected their Messiah here, it's not God rejecting them. No. That's why his servants do not fight. But it is clear, Jesus is saying, my kingdom is not from here. It is not an earthly kingdom in that regard. It's not of this world. It is not an army that he's leading to overthrow Rome. His kingdom isn't a political kingdom to rival Rome anyways. It's the kingdom of heaven. And if you read Daniel, kingdoms of this world pale in comparison to the eternal kingdom of heaven that the Messiah has come. And Jesus is very right on point when he says, he's not the king of these Jews, is he? Because after all, they've rejected him. My kingdom is not of this world. Pilate therefore said to him, are you a king then? So now Pilate may be intrigued, or he may be just making sure he's got the facts straight. If you're not the king of the Jews, and you don't think you're the king of the Jews, what kind of king are you? And Jesus answers and says, you say that I'm a king. I'm not arguing with that. For this cause I was born, for this cause I came into the world, that I should bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth hears my voice. Jesus is going to tell you the truth. He is a king. In what way? He is the king of the Jews. He is their Messiah. They've just rejected him. He is the promised son of David, the anointed one. Psalm 2, so many other places. Jesus is the King of heaven. Within less than 2 months of this event, he is going to bodily ascend into heaven to a throne at the right hand of the Father to receive the kingdom of heaven. Jesus is the King who ascends that throne because he ascends the cross, because he is lifted up. He receives the crown through the cross. There is no crown without the cross. And so, lastly, Jesus is the King of truth. He is the way, the truth, and the life. He told the disciples that just earlier the day before. He is no lies, no deceptions. This world is full of deceptions. Can't trust a politician. The only time you know that they're lying is because their lips are moving. Just lies all the time, it seems. Jesus is not that kind of politician, not that kind of king. But he says, those who are of the truth, they'll listen to my voice. And regrettably, Pilate isn't interested in listening, is he? What is truth? He doesn't care. Pilate rejects not only the person who is the embodiment of truth, not only the king who will judge him, it's appointed unto men once to die and then the judgment. Pilate doesn't even listen. He's got all the information he really came for. And too often we're that way too, aren't we? We just come for the amount of little information we want, and we're not willing to listen to the full truth, are we? Especially when it comes from God, right? I just want something to make me feel better for the day. Or just give me something that I can already agree with. Right? God is inconvenient that way, isn't he? He gives us all the truth, the uncomfortable truth. He holds the mirror up to us and we won't like what we see. But he loves us enough to not leave us the way we are. He loves us to receive us, sinners that we are, but he loves us too much to leave us as the sinners that we are. And so notice Pilate rejects. But Pilate verifies something that we all know to be true. Pilate said to him, "What is truth?" And when he said this, he went out again to the Jews and said to them, "I find no fault in him at all." There's nothing wrong with this man. He's not a threat to Rome, that's for sure. Is he now? He's the judge of Rome. Again, my mind goes to, you should read some Daniel 7 or Daniel chapter 2, the stone cut without human hands that smashes the statue, or the Ancient of Days and Judgment in Daniel 7. Oh, there's some good stuff ahead. But we see here where Pilate says he's not a threat. Not right now, at least. I don't know why you're trying to execute him. He didn't trust him. He was right on that part. But it still didn't make sense to him why they were so adamant to have him killed. But Pilate finds no fault and no threat. And while on the one hand he'd like to free Jesus, Pilate's in a bad spot. History tells us that his patron and friend who kept him in good standing with Caesar had fell out of favor with Caesar himself and was executed. And so Pilate's kind of on the watch list. And so we're going to see the crowd work that, where Pilate's skating on thin ice with Rome anyways, and he's supposed to represent Rome. But in Rome's estimation, this is a sinless man. I find no fault in him at all. And that sinlessness is why they executed him. Because we see a little later where the crowd cries out, "We don't want the sinless king of the Jews. We want a criminal. We'd rather have someone of our own choosing than the man of God's choosing." woe unto us. Our hands are bloody as well. Will we repent? And will we accept this King? Because one day every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. Will we do it now and receive the blessing, or will we do it then to our condemnation? I pray that we are following Jesus. May we follow him a little closer each day. God bless. God see you. We'll see you next time.